And the reason this is dangerous, it does lead to resentment. If there's misunderstanding, then wrong things and wrong ideas and wrong people get blamed. This is why the campaign is so crucial, because I think we have been able to bring to the people, and many more people than I ever dreamed, this message of freedom, the message of the Constitution and limited government, free markets, and the whole works. And it's an answer for us. And we don't have to, be despondent over it. If we don't do something about it later on, we may be very despondent over it, but right now we can still meet in a room like this. And I was told there'd be a couple dozen spammers here tonight, but look, there's a lot more than that. Now, they kept writing us off after the debates when they say, oh, you win all those post-debate polling because you have those couple dozen spammers that know how to vote on the internet. But I wonder where those 250,000 donors came from and those millions of dollars I've sent to say, we need this message to be spread. But it is truly a very, very positive message. I've always wondered over the years that I've been doing this, the last 30 years, I've always lamented the fact that here we have the most wonderful message of freedom and individualism and sound money and a sensible foreign policy. Why aren't we getting further along? And I always thought, we've come up short. And I think we as constitutionalists, as libertarians and conservatives, we haven't done a very good job probably on the economic issues because they paint us as being uncaring. They say, oh, you guys just want to keep all your money, and you don't care about it. But you know what? If we're humanitarians, there's no other system you can accept because socialism and communism and welfareism doesn't work. So if you really want to help your fellow man, you have freedom. And if you have freedom, you have prosperity, and then there is a lot more charity. Today, it gets more difficult all the time to be charitable when we have nothing more than debt in our pockets. I mean, last year, at the end of the year, there were over $900 billion of credit card debt, and that's people trying to survive. Of course, sometimes being careless, but at times just trying to survive and pay their bills. So it's not easy to be charitable. Government are very charitable with somebody else's money, of course, never with their own. So, but this, as bad as things seem on the surface, actually the answers are not that difficult. And they're found in something very wonderful, and that is what made America great, and that is freedom. Freedom and self-reliance and responsibility and sound money. And we can reverse this. There are other countries, when they collapse, like the Soviet system, they don't have the same traditions that we have. We at least can read about and understand what real private property was all about. We can understand what sound money was all about and voluntary contracts and the incentive system. So it's going to be much easier for us to go back. But right now, if we don't change things in a very significant manner, this is not going to go well for us. And something has to give. At the beginning of the year, I said that I didn't think there would be very many that would respond, believing that my role would be merely to make a case for it and vote in that manner, so if somebody ever wanted to look back, they could say, well, this is what we could have or should have done. But it looks like there was a bit of an explosion in the interest of these views, and but this means the country is really ready. They're ready for a change. They know something's happening. Something big is going on. And when I look at the economic conditions, I do look at the dollar on a regular basis, because if you look at it over all of history, when countries spend way beyond their means, especially when they develop an empire that they shouldn't have in the first place, they usually drive their country into bankruptcy. Our country is insolvent. We're not bankrupt in the sense that the whole thing collapses, because there's still some trust in the money. There's certainly a lot of trust in our military, and there's trust in our economic system because we still have an appearance of a lot of wealth. But in truth, we're not solvent. If we had to pay off all the bills and the obligation, we don't even come close. And the obligations are falling on this next generation is very ominous. As we see the many, many more retiring, the baby boomers retiring, and the demands that will be put on the younger generations, the numbers just aren't there. So this is the reason I believe young people and everybody else who is concerned about our economic system and our government and our freedoms are responding. Some people respond because they're tired of the war. Some people respond because they're tired of the war on the American people and their freedoms. Some people... And some people respond because they see what's coming economically, and there are others that respond because of all those reasons, and that we have to do it, have to do something. You know, one thing that I have always advocated is, as much friendship and trade and freedom of movement of people with other countries. And we sometimes get painted as, oh, you are the people who believe in isolationism and you don't want to deal with the world. And, I think it's exactly the opposite. The founders never told us to be isolationists, and it's not in the Constitution. As a matter of fact, they encourage trade and they encourage friendship. What they wanted to do is not get involved militarily and get involved in the internal affairs of other nations. And I think back about in the 60s when so many of my views were formed, and that was during the time I was both studying medicine and also reading economics. And I was in the military at the time. I had served 5 years in the military, and that was a tough decade. It was a tough decade that required a big payment because we were, doing the guns and butters, and a lot of changes were going on. But the tragedy of the 60s, not only did we see it socially here at home and the riots and the killing, but overseas, it was Vietnam, unconstitutional war. There was no business for us to be over there. And then in 1968, we finally had an election. The election was really over the war, and they were tired of the Democrats who had caused this war to come about, and they changed parties. But the utter tragedy about that was even after 1968, 30,000 more Americans were killed. It made no sense whatsoever, and yet we were trapped in there. It was a political war, and one of the statements made after the war between two colonels, one of our colonel and Colonel Tu, who was Vietnamese, and the American colonel said to him, he says, you know what? He says, you guys never beat us in one military battle. And the Vietnamese colonel said, that is true, but it's also irrelevant. But we did lose, and we have to admit the facts. We lost, and we had to come home. And it was an utter tragedy. And yet, what happened? After 20 years of the French and the Americans fighting and telling the Vietnamese how they had to run their country, yes, they were imperfect, but we're imperfect too. We should work on our imperfection, not their imperfection. But what has happened since that time? All of a sudden, we started trading with Vietnam, talking to Vietnam. The president of Vietnam comes over here. We invest over there. They come over here. And what did we do with China? They said we could never leave because there would be the sweeping of the whole region with communism, the domino effect. It didn't happen. I mean, right now, the Chinese are better capitalists than we are. They're our banker now, So it proves that, the odds of us now fighting China militarily in Vietnam, really very, very remote. But my point is just think of what we achieved in peace, what we couldn't achieve in war. And there's...